Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, known, of course, as the mighty OGGO. First of all, thank you for everyone for accommodating another committee witness timelines. So we've switched with them. So thanks for everyone for their flexibility. And of course, we want to wish a very happy birthday to our Vice Chair, Miss Khalid, whose birthday is today. We will not subject our witnesses to our singing, but perhaps after. So pursuant to Standing Order 1083C, the committee is holding a briefing session with the Parliamentary Budget Officer on his analysis of Budget 2025. We'll start with a 5-minute opening statement. Mr. Jacques, Mr. Jacques, welcome back as always, and to your team, welcome back as always. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And distinguished members of the committee for the invitation to appear before you today and discuss our report regarding Budget 2025. Je suis accompagné de mes collègues Marc Mahabir, Christina.
I'm joined by my colleagues Marc Mahabir, Christina Grinchboon, and Diana Sourong, and Gali Nicole. They are the technical experts who led our work on analyzing Budget 2025. They will be ready to answer your questions. At this point, the witnesses typically read speaking points that repeat text from a report that you've already read. Instead of doing that, and given the committee's role as the House committee responsible for reviewing our estimates, I would like to, first of all, provide a brief administrative update before turning to your questions.
Our strategic reorientation continues. We are focusing more on serving our parliamentary clients and less on media engagement. Since the beginning of September, we have held more meetings with parliamentarians and their staff than we would typically hold over the course of an entire year. This increase in outreach has been offset by declining a substantial number of media requests for on-the-record interviews. This is part of our effort to prioritize our mandate of supporting Parliament and ensure that people focus on the technical content of our work. Second, our plan for a 5% reduction in the office's budget has been finalized and will be submitted to the Speakers of the House and Senate in the coming days. Our CFO is now developing a medium-term plan to reduce overhead expenses while maintaining the quality of service to Parliament. I expect to have an update for the committee early in the new year. Finally, the OECD legislative review of our office began this week. I want to thank all parliamentarians who shared their time with the review team. We expect a report with recommendations to be published in the coming months. The results of this review are expected to guide further reforms to the office that will ensure it continues to be one of the top independent fiscal institutions in the OECD. As always, our office remains committed to its core mandate, providing independent and nonpartisan analysis to support Parliament in its scrutiny of public finances and the economy. Conformément à ce mandat inscrit dans la loi,
consistent with the PBO's legislated mandate, my office prepared an independent analysis of Budget 2025, which was published last Friday. This report highlights key issues, including the government's adoption of a new budgeting framework that separates operating expenses from capital investments and the introduction of new fiscal anchors. And now, Mr. Chair, we look forward to answering your questions on the budget issues note that we have dedicated to budget issues, and we're always glad to support the important work of this committee.
Our 6-minute rounds with Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence, welcome back to OGGO.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Mr. Jacques, for being here. And thank you for your courage and nonpartisan nature and willingness to speak truth to power. Canadian people truly owe you a debt of gratitude. So thank you very much for that. Now, I want to take you back, Mr. Jacques, to the election where Prime Minister Carney had two primary commitments or promises to the Canadian people. He promised, one, that the operational budget would be balanced, and secondly, that the deficit to GDP ratio would be declining. Now, in your report, you've had the ability to review the budget, and you had some pretty clear commentary on that. So I want to give you the opportunity just to make your comments and put that on the record. In the Parliamentary Budgetary Officer's opinion, will the government deliver on their promise to balance the operational budget?
Thank you for the question. I would mention that during the election campaign, at that point, the Liberal Party of Canada platform also included the key fiscal anchor, and a very important fiscal anchor, long-standing fiscal anchor, existing for the Government of Canada for about the past 30 years, of a declining debt to GDP ratio. Turning to your question with respect to the operational budget and the probability of the government achieving its new fiscal anchors, based upon the analysis we've conducted, there is a low probability of respecting the fiscal anchors the government has set out for itself.
Yeah, I believe you put the chance at less than 50%, if that's not incorrect in your report. And in that, despite or in addition to the fact that, and you've had considerable commentary on this, as moving items that would be traditionally, or at least in the UK system, classified as operational, pushed over to the capital to make this, to enable a greater chance at achieving this balance.
What the hell?
Pushed over to the capital to make this, to enable a greater chance at achieving this balance. But I'll move on, and I agree with you that they have cast aside the fiscal anchor of debt to GDP, and that seems to just have been forgotten from just 6 months, 8 months ago. But if we go to their metrics and we just play on their field, as it were, and we go to the deficit to GDP ratio, they have also committed to the fact that they would have a declining balance, which is a much easier mark to hit, in my opinion, than the debt to GDP. What do you believe the chances are they'll deliver on this second fiscal anchor?
Christina, did you want to respond to that one?
Sure. For the deficit to GDP, we've estimated it to be around 7.5% that they will achieve this target. It is in our assessment of the sustainability of this anchor specifically. The condition is that the deficits will be declining every single year over the projection horizon.
So to be clear, there were actually, as you point out, Mr. Jacques, correctly, there were 3 fiscal anchors that the Prime Minister Carney promised to deliver to Canadians. One was debt to GDP, the other was deficit to GDP, and the other was balancing the operational budget. And it's very unlikely that he will achieve any, if all of them. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I only raised the debt to GDP anchor because, as part of the premise to your question, you mentioned the election campaign, you mentioned the fiscal anchors that the Liberal Party of Canada campaigned on. And I know that potentially for some there's a bit of lack of clarity regarding the changes that have occurred to those fiscal anchors since the election campaign, and in particular leading up to the Prime Minister's comments in the House of Commons in the 3rd week of September, where he indicated that the debt to GDP anchor was still one of the fiscal anchors for the Government of Canada. But of course, as we and others learned with Budget 2025, the government decided to cut that anchor.
Thank you. You know what, numbers are important, but sometimes I'm a little bit of a math guy myself, not as much as you, Mr. Jake. So I do like numbers, but for many folks, it's important to put them in context. So I thought of an analogy. I was trying to think of an analogy of the likelihood of Prime Minister Carney delivering on his election promise, that specifically the declining deficit to GDP ratio. So I looked up the odds of the Toronto Maple Leafs winning the Stanley Cup. 7% is actually the bottom dwelling Maple Leafs or cellar dwelling Maple Leafs have a 7%. Over the next 2 years, it's 12%, which means that the Toronto Maple Leafs have a much greater likelihood of winning the Stanley Cup than Mark Carney does on delivering his promise. Is that not correct?
I don't follow hockey.
But if you accept the odds of 12%, then it would much more likely that the Toronto Maple Leafs will win the Stanley Cup than Mark Carney will deliver on his election promise. Is that not correct?
If you say so.
Thank you very much. Now I want to get to a little bit of a more serious. Okay, I'll save the rest of it for my next round. Thank you very much, Mr. Jacques.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence, and apologies to Leaf fans everywhere. Mr. Gasparo, please, for 6 minutes.
Good to see you again. Do you agree directionally with our government's plan?
Given that the mandate provided to the Parliamentary Budget Office is simply to undertake technical analysis, it's not our place to agree or disagree with an economic or fiscal policy of the government.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you said that, because maybe we can drill down a little bit. In the report you tabled, you said, and I quote, "Given the proximity of the baseline federal debt to GDP ratio in 2055-56 to its initial level in 2024-25, our framework would suggest that there is a modest negative fiscal gap. That is, based on Finance Canada projections, current fiscal policy in budget 2025 would be deemed sustainable over the long term." So we're investing more in infrastructure that has productivity benefits over the long term for our economy. You've provided testimony here before that suggests our government's plan to invest in infrastructure and long-term productive assets that help alleviate some of the concerns that currently exist within the economy. Do you believe that that focus on capital spending, on investing in hard assets that generate revenue and increase productivity is where the government should be focused on? And should the government be focused more broadly on that capital spending?
Again, it's not our place to offer recommendations to the government with respect to their fiscal and economic policy. I would repeat what I said at previous committees, which is, I think broadly speaking, most mainstream economists would recommend investments in the economy to increase its overall productive capacity and in turn increase the growth potential of the Canadian economy, which in turn increases the potential for improvements in the quality of life for the population. And that is not to say whether I endorse the government's fiscal and economic policy or not. That's in the, it's a more of a theoretical, geeky response to a very specific question about a specific document.
Well, we do geeky well here, so welcome, you know. Actually, I'm getting to know you as well, Chair, and I can confirm that. The IMF recently stated that Canada has meaningful fiscal capacity and remains a reliable and credible place to invest. How does your office incorporate that international assessment into your analysis, or does it at all?
Yeah, I would say we do. It's part of the many indicators we incorporate as part of our macroeconomic outlook. So the international environment is a key aspect of that. I would say, and something that we have raised in the past, and certainly I've raised, is while the IMF, I'm aware of the statement, the IMF did not put a specific numerical value with respect to the additional capacity that they believe the federal government could use as part of those investments. And something that I have highlighted and the office has highlighted is the point around transparency. So going back to the discussion around fiscal anchors, it's not our place to judge which fiscal anchors the Government of Canada wants to use. It is our place, consistent with the mandate of the office, to highlight when the fiscal anchors are changing in a way in which there isn't a lot of discussion happening, and potentially there are some people unaware of why they're changing. And in the same way, I certainly take your point and the IMF's point that there might be additional debt that Canada could take on to make those investments. In the same way, there's been no discussion with respect to how much debt that potentially would be.
But sir, in your tabled report, you say the debt to GDP ratio is sustainable over the long term, right? So what I'm trying to square is your answer to my colleague a few moments ago, and what the IMF is saying, and what's tabled in your report, because there seems to be some dislocation there. So I'm just trying to understand, do you believe that over the long term, Canada's debt to GDP ratio is sustainable? Yes or no?
Based on Finance Canada's numbers, yes.
Thank you. Okay, I'll save it for the next.
Ms. Gaudreau, please, for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup de votre présence.
Thank you very much for your presence. It's very valuable. Given that I only have 6 minutes, I'll start with the basics. I'm not an accountant. I'm a businesswoman. And what is an investment? I can answer. I think that the natural approach is to lean on the national accounting system that is used also to calculate the GDP. And in that context, an investment corresponds to a transaction which increases the country's assets, which increases the capital balance for the country. So we can talk about investments in infrastructure, where one builds infrastructure or developing IP products. So that's in terms of buying. It's not a loan. It's a purchase, and then it belongs to us. It's an accumulation of assets. Because we often hear the government say, well, we took our inspiration from Quebec. We know how it works with Quebec, with the PQI. If there's a $13 billion investment on an investment of $10 billion, be it a bridge or a school, well, a school belongs to the government. So currently, are we able, with the information that you have, to demystify what is the investment that we have in our budget? I think that if we look at the capital budgeting framework that was presented in the budget, I think it's one of the things that we do mention in our report, that for some categories included, there's a direct connection with the accumulation of capital. And for other categories, the connection is less direct. So it's hidden. It's just not clear. So if I'm asking the question, if we want to fund FIFA, what is the built capital in terms of the present moment? That's not stated in the budget, which, with the approach that was presented for some measures that are in some categories, what is the asset? It's easier to determine what's the asset that was bought and what's the relationship between the government expense and the transaction made by the government and the impact on the assets. Okay, I'm really concerned because we have the agency that will be created for national defense, and we're told much will be invested. So the investment is what will belong to us. So do you have any information in terms of how much money will be specifically dedicated to investment? So we're dealing with other countries. We're evaluated evaluating our needs in terms of national defense, do we know exactly how much money how much of that money that's put in will be goods that will belong to us in terms of defense? Yes.
82 billion in the budget. We have submitted an information request to the Department of D&D to determine the reconciliation with the data that we have in our office on the previous expenditures made by the government. So we're not sure on the amount that is incremental in the budget to the previous
OK.
expenditures.
Fait que là, on sait pas le montant.
So we don't know what the amount is. And at the same time, is there a guarantee that the contracts will be concluded by people in the country? So if we're investing assets, it's not in Korea that the work will be done, that we will have the equipment. So that is not in the budget, right? Okay, so in what way does the budget currently give us the exact value of what is an investment? Do you have that information? Microphone, please. The microphone's not on. So maybe we can refer to Table 3 in the report that we published last Friday. What we did in that table, where we use the definition of the government and the definition that we recommended, which was where the direct connection is. We can see what we identified as capital investments, where the relationship between the government investment and the stock capital increased. So it's on the bottom line, and we're between 30 and 40 billion every year. So I don't have a lot of time left. I just want to know the people who give us quotes, the firms that give us those things, if they're not even able to identify what the capital investment is in relationship to the loans, how will they react in terms of the results, in your opinion? I think it's always important to remember that all the other data are valid. And the Government of Canada decided to add several other measures, new fiscal anchors, but at the same time, the older ones, the data in terms of the debt to GDP, the deficit, and other similar things, these figures are still there. And for us, that's reassuring. And maybe there are differing opinions in terms of the quality and the importance of the new measures in the budget. At the same time, if you don't want to use them or to look at them, all of the older measurements were there.
Thank you very much, Chair, and welcome here, Mr. Jacques, and welcome to all of your staff that support you in the very important work that is done through your office. Fitch Ratings wrote a scathing report on the budget just 48 hours after it was tabled, and I want to quote from that report. The Canadian government has a track record of upward deficit revisions with subsequent budget updates consistently worse than prior projections. Given that these rules are non-binding and prior versions have been ignored, federal finances run a high risk of further deterioration, end quote. What do you make of this statement?
I think I would go back to, again, the questioning or the answers we provided to the questions from your colleague in terms of the probability of achieving the fiscal anchors that have been identified by the government, which within our report we identify as being relatively low. I would also circle back on a point that I provided in an answer to a question that was not asked on the other side of the table with respect to the fiscal anchors and the transparency around the fiscal anchors. So different people might have different opinions with respect to the financial management of the government, how that financial management should occur, what the fiscal anchors should be, and how or whether they should be changing over time. The most important aspect, certainly from our perspective, is transparency. So having an honest and open conversation among parliamentarians and the public and ratings agencies regarding why things are changing, and if so, what the justification is around that. And then people can make their own decisions.
Thank you. I know we've already discussed your findings regarding the 7.5% chance that their new fiscal anchor will be respected, and I believe that finding was very similar to what Fitch commented on. And I guess my question to you is, should parliamentarians and indeed all Canadians be concerned with the government's ability to meet their own set goals?
Mm-hmm. The government certainly has the ability to achieve their goals. I would quote from the Prime Minister that it is a very ambitious budget with very ambitious goals. And certainly we are paying attention to those goals and the progress that's being made, both on the spending and on the results side. And parliamentarians should be doing this. I would encourage parliamentarians to be doing the same.
Thank you. That's a great segue into the next question that I have, and I appreciate the comments that you've made regarding transparency and nonpartisanship, and that which you function under as the parliamentary budget offices. Section 79.4 of the Parliament of Canada Act allows the PBO free and timely access to any information under the control of a department or parent crown. Can you tell us about the risks and precedent the government is creating by not handing over documents when requested by your office?
Yes, thank you for the question. So under the Parliament of Canada Act, as you mentioned, we are able to compel departments, Crown corporations, to provide us information in a timely and in a free manner. So we did submit information requests to 5 departments related to information provided in the budget, and they indicated that they could not provide us the information. After that, we did notify the Speaker, both Speakers, the House and the Senate, that the information was not provided, and the letter was tabled in both houses, both chambers of Parliament. So right now we're sort of in limbo on the remedy, because there is no remedy mentioned in the Parliament of Canada Act on instances where the department or Crown Corporation does not provide information to our office.
I would have to say that that is deeply concerning, not only to parliamentarians, but I'm sure to all Canadians who have come to understand the very important role that your office plays in providing Canadians with that impartial advice and, I guess, review of what the government is proposing through their budget and through various policies that they introduce. Thank you.
Thanks. Ms. Rochefort, please.
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I just want to come back to slightly the question that was asked by my colleague, Mr. Lawrence, about context, just because I find it difficult to critique a budget, in a sense, without taking, I guess, the context into account. And so I'd like to just come back slightly to that and to understand, did you really not consider, I guess, the broader global context, such as, I guess, the world we live in now, which is post-pandemic, the recovery challenges we face, the impact of U.S. tariff uncertainty, high global interest rates, supply chain instability that continues to affect the world, and major geopolitical tensions, such as that in Ukraine and Russia, the modernization of NATO that's required, all of which affect revenues, costs, and economic planning. planning. And so if I understand you correctly, you're saying that none of that information is taken into account when you provide a budget analysis?
I apologize.
Maybe I misunderstood, so I appreciate.
I apologize. Again, I think as I mentioned to another committee, I am acclimating to my new role as being spokesperson for the office, and potentially in the response to the earlier question, I wasn't as clear as I should have been. Okay. It's the opposite. We take all of that into account.
Yes, thank you very much. And so that would mean then you would take into account the need for us to make historic investments to strengthen our supply chains, to expand our domestic manufacturing, our industrial competitiveness, our clean technology, to unleash our natural resources and critical mineral potential, and to secure our long-term economic growth. So you would be taking all of that into account as well.
We take into account all of the numbers, so the global economic context, the Canadian economic context, the current fiscal context for the Government of Canada, and we take all of that data into account. Correct.
Thank you very much. I just want to come back a little bit because when you last came before us, and after that there was. So I'm glad today we're saying that we're not making comments for the media, and that basically it's a discussion for parliamentarians, because I was when you came before us last time, there was a lot afterwards in the press, and former parliamentary budget officers were quoted. I think it was Kevin Page and Yvan Giroux, and I was thinking about that. And basically, they've come through the same organization, which emphasizes fiscal sustainability, but also places strong weight on the broader economic context that you just described. And so, and as I was looking at their comments, they do speak about post-recession shocks, global instability, interest rate cycles, and so on. So in reviewing what they've previously said. And so, well, I guess this leads me to question, why would they have come to slightly different viewpoints about I guess what was post-budget comments, but nonetheless, there was sufficient information to understand what might be emerging. How could their comments have been different from yours, Mr. Jacques, in that respect?
I can't say. I'm not Yves Giroux.
You did not follow the press and see the comments.
So you'd have to invite them to committee to ask them how they reached the conclusions that they did.
That they did. Okay, yeah. Thank you very much. So my third question, maybe slightly differently here. I understand there was a letter that was circulated to all of the departments because under the comprehensive expenditure review, you needed information, I guess, to make an analysis, and you asked for information by November 19th. Is that correct? Was the date? But from what I understand, there was a response that was provided that explained that departments could only begin reviewing the comprehensive expenditure review or the decisions once the budget was adopted this past Monday, and therefore did not have finalized information to meet the deadline that you requested November 19th. And so basically, as I look at some of the concerns that you've expressed, they're not complete because they don't have full information. And so I guess I kind of wonder how those concerns can be expressed. Basically, you were asking the departments to provide speculative or incomplete information. So that was, I guess, my question.
What we were asking for is similar to the budget, which is forecast information. We were asking for the forecast information prepared by departments as part of the $60 billion in cuts and the 40,000 layoffs. That was also forecast in the budget. So it's all the same forecast information. And certainly from our perspective, because the $60 billion worth of cuts is directly related to balancing the operating budget, which is one of the government's fiscal anchors, from our perspective, it was something that was certainly pertinent and valuable for parliamentarians to have as they voted on the budget. Ultimately, it proved not to be the case, which is why we referred the matter to the Speaker so parliamentarians could ultimately make a decision regarding what information they should have as part of their budgetary deliberations.
Thanks. We are past time. We'll go to Ms. Gaudreau, please, for 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je veux juste compléter.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to add, when you're saying that we're lending money to build an infrastructure, so that loan is not an investment. We're lending money in order to stimulate the economy, to help the economy. Is that right? Yes, that's the case. So that must belong to us. And there is a difference because you're explaining and identifying the source of the funds. And there's also the issue as to how the Government of Canada or a business is investing, is using the money. And there's a difference between the two. And why is that not clear in the budget? Well, you'll tell me that I'm not to decide, but clearly it's not clear. So the issue that we have is that we're saying, well, if we increase the salary of the FAC, that's the CAF rather, that's an investment. If we make a loan, it doesn't belong to us, we're investing. So what are we having built? Are there contracts that are signed which will make official the fact that the investment is to stimulate the economy and it should not be invested overseas? That's a good point. In the accounting context, there's a table with the figures of all every element of the budget, which shows the cash flow, the quantity of investment, and as you said, at the same time, there's a surplus of the use of this system in the budget. And so then I'm emphasizing the tables with figures rather than the words in the budget, because sometimes in the budgets there are the communications people who try and manage things, who inject a few words, such as investment. But for me, the figures don't lie. And have you asked for them? Yes, we've asked for more details from the Department of Defense. Did you receive it? No, not yet. So when? Oh, we received them this morning, it seems, clearly. Well, should we take a break, Chair, and we'll look at those figures and then talk? Seriously, you've just received that this morning. Well, yes, and she's reliable, so yes. So we're very eager to see them, because you don't have to be an accountant to understand that a loan doesn't belong to you. You're lending money. How much time do I have left? Oh, I'm done. Oh, it just goes too quickly.
Thank you. So pretty much every Canadian knows if the CRA audits you and asks for your receipts, you hand them over. No excuses. Now, your job essentially, as I understand it, is as an auditor as well. You audit the government, correct?
Not quite. Not
okay,
quite.
but could we say it's somewhat similar?
I would say, and certainly it's very different.
Okay.
Because, and I'd say in the case of the Auditor General, it's primarily backward looking, and they do ask for your receipts, and they do go through things in detail. We're forward looking.
Okay.
And so it does end up, it's when you come to the bank and you're asking for a loan, or you're asking an investor to give you some money, the receipts don't exist. And at the same time, the person to whom you're asking, from whom you're asking the money, they're expecting to see a business plan.
Okay, so I understand that you've asked the government then for these documents on the $60 billion in austerity and cuts and layoffs that are going to happen, and they haven't given you those. And we were forced to vote without that information, unfortunately. Is there any way that you can hold the government accountable for not doing their duty?
I would say it's certainly not. As an agent of Parliament, I work for parliamentarians. So I work for you, and it's not the role of the Parliamentary Budget Officer or our office to hold the government accountable, which is why as soon as there was a conflict or a disagreement with the Federal Public Service, we raised the issue immediately with parliamentarians and referred the matter to the speakers so parliamentarians could come to hopefully a relatively quick decision regarding, do we actually want this information that already exists as part of our decision-making process? But certainly it's not, we're a nonpartisan organization. It's not our role. We're not here to critique any government policy or what the government gets up to.
Okay, so let me switch topics a little bit. Brookfield, where the Prime Minister was for years and is still a shareholder, has been flagged repeatedly as one of the most aggressive tax dodgers in Canada. Now, from an auditor's perspective, or accountant, I don't know what you want to call yourself exactly then. What are your thoughts on the fact that yesterday the clerk of the Privy Council, who's responsible for administering the ethics screen of the Prime Minister, admitted that he doesn't actually know what's in Mr. Carney's portfolio?
Sorry, point of order. What does this have to do with anything the witness is able to provide testimony on?
Yeah, thanks on your point of order. We generally do allow a very wide breadth for discussion, but I would ask that you get back to the PBO and the budget.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, so let's continue talking about, kind of the way Brookfield worked and it seems like if you worked in an environment like that, where you're doing the tax dodging, and you learn how to use shell companies and offshore accounts to get around taxes,
Sorry,
that should have been paid.
Point of order, Chair.
Your point of order?
You made a ruling, and the honourable member basically said okay, and is now ignoring.
What's your point of order, please, Mr. Gisborough?
The point of order is she ignored your ruling.
No, it's very part of my question.
Okay, can you get to the
sure.
bring it back to how it relates to the PBO and the budget?
So when you're working in that kind of environment, would you say that the Liberal budgets, like the idea of the shell kind of game, that the Liberal budget's renaming of costs and investments is a similar way of avoiding clarity and transparency through creative accounting?
I would say that regardless of the opinion that any one person might hold on the new approach or the new metrics that have been presented by the government on the operating and capital budgets, all of the old metrics still exist. So the ones that we know and love are still there, and that should provide reassurance to everyone. And ultimately, if parliamentarians find that the new metrics for the operating budget and capital budgets, if they're not particularly useful, I'm certain they can provide that feedback to the government, and I'm certain they would take it into account.
So just wondering, if someone in the private sector would shift their categories like this, would CRA consider that fraudulent or perfectly fine?
I can't speak to CRA. I would say, based upon my knowledge of publicly traded companies and publicly listed companies, you are required to publish set metrics as part of your quarterly and annual financial reporting that meet certain definitions, and at the same time you're also eligible to present different categories and different data. That said, what you do publish, and that it's well defined, has to be consistent, and that the government continues to do that.
Thanks very much. We'll go to Mr. Bardisi. Welcome to OGGO. The floor is yours for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the PBO team and the important work they do for all parliamentarians. I just want to follow up on a couple of the conversation around capital and operating budgets and capital treatment. What other jurisdictions, to your knowledge, also separate out operating and capital budgets?
It's many, if not most, jurisdictions. So I think virtually all provincial governments, the territories, it's a fairly common practice overall.
So would it be fair to say that the federal government, in adopting this practice, would be joining definitely a set of administrations, a set of governments that represents a large number of Canadians?
That would be fair to say.
Okay. I noted in your commentary some concern around definitional issues, and it's come up here a bit today, and I just want to dig a bit more into that discussion. So could you just share with us what kind of process you expect to unroll as this capital framework is being developed, and what you see as your role in that?
In terms of the process, we haven't been apprised of the process the government plans to use with respect to rolling it out. We've seen the information in the budget and read what's there, but nothing more than that.
Yeah. But typically this would be something that would also involve the treatment of figures that would then be represented in public accounts would be a matter of interest also to the Auditor General, presumably?
Presumably. Again, we haven't been consulted on what the government intends to do and how they plan to roll it out. I would note that the Liberal Party of Canada platform did indicate that the Office of the Parliamentary Budget Officer would have a role in this, and that additional resources would be provided. That seemed to be absent from Budget 2025. But, well, I guess we'll see where things go.
In your assessment, in your brief in response to looking at the budget, I noted that you had expressed some views that maybe the capital, what was considered a capital investment, might be more expansive than what would be recommended by others. But I just want to understand that, in your view, the budget projection, which projects a balance of the operating budget in 28-29, is that achievable under the projections that the government makes about its capital budget?
Under the definition used by the government around capital, yes, it's something that's achievable.
And so, therefore, whether that 28-29 objectives is attained is, in large respect, a product of the definitional issues that have to get resolved.
I would say not exclusively. So there's certainly the definitional issues, and going back to observations made by your colleague earlier, it is a very complex economic and fiscal environment. So some of those factors are under the government's control and some of them aren't under the government's control. But certainly the real economy has a very direct influence on the government's ability to achieve its fiscal anchors, in addition to technical accounting definitions.
I want to get into, just in my remaining time for now, a bit on the revenue side, and maybe on the next round I can come back on this. In your view, are the revenue projections of the federal government and the revenue forecasts that they use, the GDP forecasts that they use from a variety of sources, including yourselves, are those prudent?
I don't know. Can you define the word prudent for me?
So the revenue forecasts are a product of GDP forecasts, and from which there's a range that is chosen, and then a set of calculations and presumptions based on what the GDP forecast determines for revenue. And so I'm asking first on the GDP forecast, do you have any concerns with the way the federal government collects the GDP forecasts of the different actors?
No, I certainly on our end, it's a very good practice. So the government's efforts to go out, the long-standing efforts over the past 30 years to go out and undertake a survey of the 14 preeminent forecasters across the country in terms of their GDP outlook, as well as other financial metrics. It's a very good practice.
Okay. I'll come back next round on the rest of that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll go to Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you very much. And I want to talk a little bit about externalities and the potential for the impact. You said in the highlights in your report that there's limited fiscal room for the government to reduce revenues or increase program. Am I to take that the amount of spending undertaken from this budget has limited the government's ability to react to externalities?
So when we said that, it was based upon the government's definition and the widely used definition of fiscal sustainability. And that definition, as I mentioned earlier, is a stable or declining debt to GDP ratio. Based upon the numbers the government has in Budget 2025, in the long term, not in the medium term, but over the longer term, the government has published a longer term forecast that indicates that the debt to GDP ratio is effectively flat, declining a little bit over that period of time. So that's the question of sustainability. Your question gets into new territory, which is interesting, but I just wanted to draw the distinction, and because it seems to be where the government is going and where the IMF has gone with respect to fiscal space. So previously, the government's fiscal management in terms of dealing with shocks was economic shocks will happen that's potentially outside of the control of the government, and there will be additional room to deal with that because there has been a declining debt to GDP ratio over the preceding 7, 8, 9 years. That is no longer the case, and instead, the government's argument seems to be, and it's still not clear, and there hasn't been a parliamentary discussion around it, but it seems to be when the next economic shock comes, the federal government will take on additional debt and potentially stabilize that debt at a new and higher level. You can still be sustainable at a higher level of debt across the economy, And at the same time, consistent with the IMF research, the more debt you have and the more debt you're carrying, the greater the risk to the economy and to your financial management the next time there is a shock, and your ability to manage it and borrow debt at the rates that you want to.
Thank you very much for that very articulate answer. And just carrying forward from what you're saying there, would it be fair to characterize your comments as saying this budget has put us at greater risk should an economic shock happen?
We haven't evaluated the risk. It's a good question, and with a motion from the committee, we'd be happy to go back and look at it. I would say and circling back on the issue of transparency, it's a very good question, and I will carve time out of my day to watch OGGO. It's a very good question to put to finance officials regarding the previous approach, which was a declining debt to GDP ratio, having that additional space to deal with economic shocks that hit the economy. And now the new approach that seems to be, because we have lower debt levels in comparison to the G7, the next time there's a shock, we'll simply increase the levels of debt. Confirming that's the case, if that's the case, and also, again, I'm a numbers guy, confirming how much debt they're willing to actually spend.
Thank you. Just because you raised it, I just want to bring up sometimes the Liberals and other folks will talk about Canada's position vis-a-vis net debt. But when you look at the total gross debt, which includes subnational debt, Canada's position is actually fairly weak. We're one of the laggards in the G7 and certainly below half at the OECD. I know this isn't directly your mandate, and if you have to not answer this question, I understand. But don't you think that in your forecast and in the parliamentary discussion that we should also be looking at the total gross debt as well, which is well over 100%?
I think depending on the question that you're asking, the indicator will vary, and I think parliamentarians should be looking at a range of indicators, not only debt, also revenues, spending, productivity being a key one, age demographics, engagement of the eligible labor force in the economy, and per capita GDP are just some of those that come off the top of my head. I do think it is a much broader discussion that, again, I think this part is part of my mandate. So I will opine upon this. Up to this point, over the past 2.5 months, I have not seen that discussion happening on Parliament Hill around those broader indicators.
Thank you, Mr.
Ms. Khalid.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Here we
Thank you
go.
to the witnesses for being here today. And I believe there have been discussions around some of those indicators that you've spoken about, whether it's investments through NATO or in defense or building housing. But I want to talk to you about. In your report, you say that Canada's fiscal path is sustainable, but just as we've heard today, a lot of your public messaging has focused on the risks and the warnings, and what is the concept of a fiscal cliff. Can you reconcile the two? I mean, on the one side, we are saying that it's sustainable. On the other side, we're talking about this concept of a fiscal cliff. Can you explain that for us, please?
So the previous comments I made the last time I was here before committee were focused on the government's definition of fiscal sustainability. So as I mentioned previously, the government's definition of fiscal sustainability is a declining debt to GDP ratio. I can quote from previous Government of Canada documents with respect to the importance of a declining debt to GDP ratio as an indicator of fiscal sustainability for the government and an important piece of data in securing Canada's AAA credit rating. So that's the overall context within which we published our economic and fiscal outlook in September. The numbers we published in September did not include close to $100 billion a year in incremental spending that the Liberal Party of Canada campaigned on, that the government had announced in various speeches, but for which there was insufficient detail. And I think as everyone will recall, the debt to GDP, medium-term debt to GDP ratio forecast that we published indicated that over the next 5 years, the debt to GDP ratio, based upon our calculations, would be increasing. So by the government's own definition, the increasing debt to GDP ratio would mean, using the government's own words, that things were unsustainable. We raised concerns with respect to fiscal sustainability, and those concerns both were based on our forecast as well as the lack of inclusion of the $100 billion in spending that had been indicated, but for which there were insufficient details. Fast forward to the budget, and in the budget, over the medium term, the government itself has a medium-term forecast that indicates that the debt to GDP ratio is increasing. Over the next 25 years, the line is flat, going down a little bit, so there is a bit of fiscal space, so it is fiscally sustainable over that period of time. The debt to GDP ratio, I go back to, over the next 5 years, it is increasing. Since September, what has happened, there has been additional clarity, in particular with respect to defense. So one of the key pledges of the government, of course, is increasing NATO defense spending from 2% up to 5%. The government has indicated, and has indicated in the budget, that approximately 1.5% is going to come from existing spending. So it's not going to be net new spending necessarily. It's going to be dual purpose spending. So that does reduce some of the fiscal stress overall. In addition to that, looking back at the Liberal Party of Canada platform, there are several sizable measures that were in the platform that have yet to appear in government policy, in particular tax credits with respect to multi-unit residential buildings for developers. So that also provides additional fiscal room. So in short, the context and the numbers have changed, and certainly it obliges us to change our overall assessment. And I can assure you that as we go forward, as we have additional numbers, our assessment might change in the future, as it would, because going back to a point made by your colleague, it is a very dynamic global environment and a dynamic domestic environment as well.
Thank you. Okay, I'll just not even try. Thank you.
Good. We're happy.
For your birthday, we're going to give you an extra few seconds, maybe next round. Ms. Gaudreau, please.
Thank you very much. Could you give us a
This block
specific
MP's been pretty
example
boring, this committee.
of an investment that the federal government is making in a building here? What percent of the budget that is truly an investment in production of goods with a building, with the accounting definitions in the National Accounts of Canada? It's 100%. 100% for the building. But it's not, I'll start over again. My question is not good. In terms of infrastructure, in terms of capital investment, how much is the government putting in? What percent? Is it 2% or 98%? There are $500 billion a year in investment in the Canadian economy, and all governments are responsible for 20% of that. So salaries don't constitute investment, loans are not investment, tax credits are not investment, unless I'm mistaken. So all that is set aside. So buying a building, buying military equipment, those are investments. But how much is that? 2%, 5%? So the investment that the government is responsible for is about 4% of GDP. Well, I've just understood something. The investment that the government is telling us about, it's very creative. Well, I perceive that as expenses. that bring economic returns. What I want to have as a parliamentarian is give me the true investment, the 4%, and then we can calculate for the rest. I'm worried about the firms that give us quotes. So did the government give you that information about this new unit of measurement? Did they tell you why it's there and how to analyze it? Yes or no? Inaudible.
Sorry, that came up as inaudible. Oh, you're fine? Okay, thanks. Mrs. Jansen, and then back to Mr. Gasparo.
Wow, okay. So the $1 trillion investment plan that we've heard about in the budget. So it talks about how it's going to create $1 trillion in investment. How much of that trillion is actual government money?
If we look at the table that's presented in the budget, it's approximately $35 billion. That's directly attributable to budget 2025. But you have to keep in mind that it follows the government's definition of a capital investment.
Okay. So roughly how much of that the trillion is actually government money?
So just to provide, again, a bit more context about the trillion. So the idea is for the government to invest in capital, and the plan is to generate eventually $1 trillion of total investment, both government and private sector as well.
So how much of it is private sector expected?
We do not have that information at the moment.
Okay. So my next question was going to be, has the government provided you with a concrete list of that? Any investors, any commitments of any kind from private?
No, but one thing you have to keep in mind with that $1 trillion investment is that it doesn't distinguish between what is already taken into account in the current economic environment as well as the private sector.
No details is what you're saying. No
so
details.
We do not have the detail.
Well, I know like in Langley, we have an example. There is a transformational cultural investment that I think they've announced it at least 3 times. They're going to give, I think, $25 million. I got to double check again. But anyways, toward Langley Performing Arts Center, because, you know, we want to have more places where our kids can have their graduation ceremonies and so on. So I think the current cost estimate to build it is about, maybe not quite, but close to $100 million. So that means 75 of it has to come from some taxpayers. So if you kind of extrapolate is that how all of the investments are going to work? Is there's going to be a small portion from the government and the rest has to come from either taxpayers or like municipal taxpayers or investors, private investors?
We do not have that information.
Okay, well, then I'm going to ask this question. And maybe I can ask it of Mr. Jacques. Is it realistic to assume that knowing that in the last 10 years, like $200 billion in private investment has exited the country, that simply having the government put in like 25% of an investment is going to be enough to bring them back? Is that what we're saying with this budget?
I don't know what the government is saying with the budget. The support from the government is obviously, it's one factor, it's an important factor, it's not the only factor. And other parts of the budget certainly focus on regulatory reform and making things easier for investors. And I think we'll be in a better position to comment on how effective the additional money might be once we have more details regarding how much it is, whether, to your point, whether it is matching, and having additional clarity regarding what is actually assumed already within the budget.
Okay, so I think I have time for one more question. So, okay, good. So I know when we hired accountants for our company, that was one of the most important jobs because we felt like if we didn't understand the numbers, if we didn't know where the numbers were, we could easily be losing money and have no clue. So that was really, really important to us. So when we put out a call for an accountant, we were looking for someone that had like professional skepticism, that they weren't going to come in as a cheerleader and say, yeah, rah, 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 you guys are doing great, but that actually looked at the numbers and said, by the way, this is going offside. when I saw that the government has put out a call for someone that they say has tact and discretion, I thought that was fascinating because it kind of sounds like they want to make sure that somebody's going to keep things on the down low. Are you concerned that that is the thing, the personality trait that they're looking for?
No. And I would say, and I go back to the opening statement, so we've had more meetings with parliamentarians over the past 2 months. Like, we're clocking in at probably close to 100 at this point. Most of the meetings are in private with their staff, and none of that information is divulged with other parliamentarians. And that's important, and you need someone who can be discreet and not share that information. And in terms of tact, I also think it's very important, again, having worked on the Hill for 17 years, you get to meet people from Langley, you get to meet people from Toronto, everywhere in between, also going out to Newfoundland, different cultural backgrounds, a lot of beautiful linguistic duality, and it requires tact to deal with people from all those different backgrounds and meet them where they are, and especially recognizing that parliamentarians are the client, and so it's not a problem. We need to make sure that we're dealing with them in a tactful manner, regardless of the differences in the perception of what tact actually looks like.
And I can say thank you very much. I've really appreciated your discretion and tact.
Thank you, Mrs.
And your
Johnson. We're
skepticism.
past our time. Mr. Gasparo, please, for 5.
Great. Thank you. Kevin Page has said your office may be applying more conservative growth assumptions than, say, other institutions or previous offices, PBOs. Can you walk us through why you chose the assumptions you have for this year, and just provide some context in terms of the assumptions that were used, please?
Yeah. I haven't seen Kevin Page's comments. Can you provide me a bit more context with respect to Kevin's critique? I didn't have a chance to read his analysis.
He talked about some of the assumptions around that were used in the analysis in terms of, and maybe I can provide a written question as well if you
Sure.
want. If you want to see his quote, but it was because I don't want to bastardize it. But he was pretty direct that some of the assumptions that your office had used were overly conservative. So I can provide that probably in a written.
Sure, that'd be great. Again, I'm not familiar with. I haven't seen Kevin publish any analysis in a very long time.
Right.
So I would like to read his analysis and go through his spreadsheets before I offered any comments with respect to his views.
For sure.
And the views of parliamentarians with respect to the forecasts that we produce and the assumptions we use. I would say, something I pay very close attention to, looking at our GDP forecasts and the aggregate forecasts, we're pretty much right in the middle right now. And that takes into account, we receive a monthly publication, Consensus Economics. It takes into account the numbers the Government of Canada is using in Budget 2025. It takes into account the updated IMF forecast and the updated OECD forecast. So before I say I think Mr. Page is incorrect, I would like to see his analysis before I reach that conclusion. So if you can provide it in writing alongside the analysis that he's generated to support that, I'd be happy to provide that analysis back to committee.
For sure. Maybe we can go at it a different way then. Have you changed the assumptions you use for your analysis for this year from previous years, or has your office changed the assumptions or altered the assumptions that have been used in previous analysis by the PBO from previous budgets to this one?
I would say the fundamental assumptions are unchanged, as is the case with a very rapidly evolving economic situation. The assumptions will always change, and I go back to the last time we were here, we answered questions with respect to tariffs in particular. So looking at the assumptions that we make with respect to the current tariff regime between Canada and the U.S., countervailing tariffs in Canada, and as well the assumptions with respect to a successful renegotiation of the existing agreement between Canada and the U.S., those assumptions continue to evolve. I would say that, again, potentially, they continue to evolve, as they should, based upon updated data. Again, going back to the response to a question asked by one of your colleagues, when the facts and the numbers change, obviously you need to incorporate that in the forecast.
Well, I'm glad you talked about assumptions evolving and macro global economic environment evolving and changing. So, as you have presented here before, that a focus on, again, productive assets, capital assets, hedges against a lot of the macroeconomic issues our country is facing. I want to try to put that into a historical context. In a long ago life, I worked for former Prime Minister Paul Martin. Then Finance Minister Martin was dealing with a very serious economic situation back in the mid-90s.
Yeah, but he balanced the budget.
Could you put into today's, can you put into context the debt servicing cost that we are currently dealing with today versus what we were dealing with in the mid-90s?
Paul Martin ended up running a surplus.
I was going to say, we are out of time, but...
Say that again?
Sorry,
lower.
Lower, thank you.
I was going to say I can allow a bit of time for an answer, but...
One-word answers are fine. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll now go to Mr. Lawrence, please.
Flattery will get you everywhere.
And then Ms. Rochford after Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you. Mr. Jacques, the theme of my questions this round will be about transparency. So I want to start out with the division between the operating budget and the capital budget. Of course, there's been much discussion of this. In your own report, you stated its PBO maintains its view that the government's definition of capital investments is overly expansive, stating that a total of $217 billion over 2024 to 2029, an increase of almost 30% or $94 billion, stating that the government's overstated the capital budget by almost $100 billion, understated the operational budget by the same amount. So would you say that the government is out of step with countries such as the United Kingdom as well as other OECD countries in the way that they separate out the capital budget from the operating budget?
They have a different definition. So while other countries and provinces do separate and present data around operating capital budgets, the Government of Canada has a very different definition.
And that different definition would make comparison to other countries, well, not impossible, perhaps more difficult.
It could, if you, and again, something else I've mentioned to the committee previously, there are other data sets collected by the Government of Canada, most notably the System of National Accounts and the GDP accounts collected by StatCan, that have another definition of capital and operating, which is commonly used around the world. And, of course, those definitions are also, they roll up and they're set by the United Nations. There are also Public Service Accounting Board standards or Public Sector Accounting Board standards, which in turn have their own definition of operating and capital. Those are generally linked to international financial reporting standards, and that would allow you to look at the federal government's spending on operating and capital and compare it across other jurisdictions on a more comparable basis. The new definition set by the government, you would need some time to reset it in such a way or recalculate it in such a way where you could easily compare it.
Thank you, Mr. Jacques. In your words, overly expansive definition of capital investments in the budget would have the effect of making it easier for the government to achieve a balanced operational budget, would it not?
That's correct.
Thank you. And I realize that you're not an auditor, but to the extent that it affects the PBO, we've seen a trend in recent years of the government either failing to deliver in a timely way the budget or the public accounts, or, as you've recently mentioned, the failure to share information with your office. To the extent that it impacts the PBO, can you talk about what the government's failure to deliver a budget on a timely basis, the public accounts on a timely basis, or to share information with your office?
Yeah, I think for myself, the emphasis is less on our ability to do our job and the ability of parliamentarians to do their job. And in particular, as everyone around this table is painfully aware, there are many, many votes that happen in Parliament around money, both appropriation bills, budget votes, confidence vote earlier this week, Ways and Means motions, for which you need data. There should be financial data made available. The Government of Canada does a fairly good job at generating substantial amounts of financial information. A point that we've made is a point we've made in the past is the government doesn't always provide that data in a timely way that is digestible for parliamentarians. And that undermines the ability of parliamentarians to vote on things in an informed way. And just very recently, I think the week of the budget is potentially a very poignant observation where we had the budget being tabled, we had the public accounts being tabled, we had supplementary estimates B being tabled, and we had the departmental results reports being tabled. In English, prose, it was well over 10,000 pages worth of documentation. I don't know the number in French prose, likely higher. Within a very short period of time, the deluge of information, very pertinent information for parliamentarians to make decisions, is not helpful to support the processes that occur on the Hill for the people who are democratically elected and expected to make decisions, the best decisions on behalf of their constituents.
Thank you, Mr. Jacques. I appreciate your candor.
Thanks. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I would just like to follow my colleague, Mr. Bardisi's line of questioning, because if I understood your response, Mr. Jacques, basically the new budgeting framework separating operating and capital expenditures is, in a sense, a practice that is utilized by many municipal governments, I think you said provincial governments, by the private sector. Would that be? And I think you spoke about public companies more so than private sector. So it is a current business practice in the mainstream economy.
That's correct.
In this situation with the government, is it both proposed to be used for both budgeting and for reporting purposes?
That's my understanding based upon the information presented in the budget.
And would that be in line with how private companies or the public sector or other governments also do so?
That's my understanding.
Raven, thanks for the 10.
So in a sense, it does bring more transparency to the process because would that be... Oh, yes, I wasn't sure what they were laughing at. Pardon me. And so I'm not sure what I was asking there, but overall, I guess it would be your sense that it brings a greater degree of transparency. It's a matter of definition, I think, is what you're suggesting.
That's correct. I would further say if the government had come up with a new mechanism for internal decision-making around operating and tagging things as operating and capital, and then refused to publish that information and share it with Parliament, I think that would be a significant gap in transparency. And it's not. They have a new decision-making framework internally around operating and capital, and they are sharing that information with parliamentarians and presenting it. So it's a compliment.
Can I just come to public accounts timing? Because I noted that I'm okay for time? Okay, that you had noted that we should change the deadline from December 31st to September 30th. Advancing it would be correct. And you indicated that this would improve transparency. And I guess you just noted the fact that you get many documents at the same point in time, and it'd be 10,000 pages. I'm not sure what was that particular number. Is there a risk, however, in trading off accuracy? As much as we try to push the public service and the government machine to provide information, is there a risk in doing so just as we were asking for information by November 19th, when they weren't in a position to provide that information. Is there a risk when we push and insist on having things, as quickly as we can, is there a risk in trading off accuracy of information?
I would go back. I would go back to a quote from a former Comptroller General who appeared before this committee, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago, who indicated that, from his perspective, it was an earlier target was certainly reasonable. I believe he was focused on October 15th, which was actually a recommendation from this committee based upon the discussions that they had with the former Comptroller General. So certainly from our perspective, it's a very valid point that you raise in terms of the reasonableness of doing it and moving it earlier. At the same time, if the data are audited, complete in both official languages, and could be shared with Parliament earlier, rather than providing additional discretion to the public service regarding when the information is ultimately released, then publishing or setting an earlier publication date, from our perspective, serves parliamentarians better.
So if I understand correctly, can you just repeat that date that you mentioned? I just want to remember it. October, you said your former...
Well, it was the former Comptroller General of Canada in response to, it was a recommendation from the Government Operations Committee, had mentioned that October 15th, from his perspective, was a reasonable timeline.
Okay. And so
we focused on September 30th based upon international guidance.
Okay.
And although it might be a stretch target, we have the utmost confidence that the public service is well situated to achieve the additional 2 weeks.
Is there an overall commitment by the government? Like, is there a formal date that is October 15th and the formal commitment date from the government? Do you know?
I don't believe there is.
There is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sadly, the former Comptroller, he's a former Comptroller General who's now retired.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for just specifying that date. I think this year they were tabled then officially November 7th, so about 2 weeks off, or over 2 weeks off, I guess. Thank you so much for responding.
Great. Thanks very much, colleagues. We're actually running ahead of time, shockingly. So we're going to have one more after this round. We'll have one more round of probably we'll get to 3 interventions. So there'll be 2 block spots. So we're going to combine them right now into one 5-minute block, and then we will skip our next time around. So it'll be Ms. Gaudreau.
Block.
Yes, then Mrs. Block, and then we'll go back to Mr. Bardisi, and then we'll start the next. So I'll just need to find out who's going for the Libs and the Conservatives. Go ahead, Madame Gaudreau.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'm really amazed. I'm thinking about the people who are listening to us and thinking, oh, it's more transparent. And then the first question that I asked was, what about capital investment? We're talking about 4%. So if we calculate, and you've certainly does it, the figures you have without that definition of the unit of measure, do you know what it would have looked like if we had really presented investment in relation to investments in terms of credits or loans? The comparison we make in our published report is that we compare a definition that's closer to that of the UK, which is considered maybe more standard in other places, with that of the government. And what we've seen is there's a difference of about 30% between those 2 definitions. So we have the advantage at the Bloc to have economists. My colleague from Mirabel deserves my gratitude, who compared with preceding budgets, with the preceding matrix. And I don't know if you've carried out that process. If I look at the figures from 2015 to 2024, it even leads up to a surplus, not just a balance in terms of billions. Did you observe that if we had kept the same units of measurement, we would have had a result that would have been 30% or more? There are 2 calculations that we made in our report. One is to compare the definitions and what that would give in terms of capital investment. And the other exercise we carried out is that we compare the situation before the units of measurements that came before the fall economic statements, and it shows us if we don't add those units of measure, the government, according to their definitions, is in a situation of surplus for a part of the years that they've forecast. So you received the information very late. You didn't receive the explanation that was complete. There were no consultations, and I remember that up to August 28th, there were all kinds of people who were claiming there were needs, and we didn't study it. I think that there were pre-budget meetings that were canceled, and I find that incredible. And now we hear you say, listen, it's really important to have the budget, and we're waiting for it. We already had your figures. We had news for it being November 4th. It didn't give you a lot of time. And I'm really aghast when we're told there is transparency. We know where we're going. We've been waiting for a budget for a long time. And I'm concerned that people are not well informed about the situation. And I hope and I demand that you have everything you need to do the work so you can answer our questions precisely. So the document that just came to you, I hope that in terms of funding you'll be able to answer. So time is passing quickly. So I'll focus on the midterm impact. It's good to say, oh, Australia uses this, other countries do this, and we do it too. But how we do it is another question. And in the end, who gives us our rating? With our model, is there a positive impact on our credit score in terms of the figures that we give them, because they need to know what's an expense and a true investment? That's a question you have to ask those agencies, not us. You don't think that agency can have some figures and say, well, I need details, so my score will be different. So as I said earlier, there's been an increase in the amount of data we have because the Canadian government has decided to share more details about the operating budget and the investment budget. And there's still the same basket of data that we had in the past. And for these agencies, they've had more time to evaluate this. The context is very different here with external agencies, because here you have to make quick decisions. And with the decisions, your obligation to vote on the budget, there were a few days only. And for me, that's something really important in terms of transparency, the act of giving enough time to the MPs and senators so that they can digest all of the data in the budget, so that they can make an informed decision.
Block, different block, and then over to Mr. Bardisi. 5 minutes, please, Mrs. Block.
Thank you very much, Chair. That was always a joke when I was first elected, and it's coming back to haunt me. Mr. Jacques, I appreciate your pragmatic perspective on the need for the PBO to exercise discretion in all its dealings, in its role serving parliamentarians and serving us well. I also appreciate your earlier comments today where you spoke to the independent and nonpartisan role of your office. I'm recalling at your first appearance at our committee that you testified to the alarming reality that anyone could have been appointed to the interim position. You had just been appointed, and you provided us with that testimony. You provided us with, just, I guess, something to think about when it came to the fact that There was a lack of requirements, including the need for the individual to even be a Canadian citizen, have management experience, or even a requirement that they be bilingual. And that is not something that we've lost sight of. And so I believe there needs to be a PBO appointed to a full-time position who is vetted by parliamentarians, who can be free to do the nonpartisan work of bringing transparency and accountability to the government's finances. And so for this reason, I would like to move the motion that I put on notice. I know that the matter is at hand right now, and so if I could, I would like to read the motion into the record.
One that was sent out this morning?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, please.
That the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates recommend that the Prime Minister's Office and Privy Council Office submit to the committee a short list of candidates for the permanent parliamentary budget officer position, that the committee conduct interviews with the shortlisted candidates as part of the consultation process specified in the Parliament of Canada Act, and that, unless otherwise decided by unanimous consent of the House of Commons, an appointment to the position of parliamentary budget officer shall be made only if the nominee has been selected by the unanimous agreement of the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, which includes members from each recognized party in the House, and that the House be so informed by way of a report from this committee. Thank you.
I'm actually okay with that.
Did
She just wants to change it from a House thing
You go
to
ahead.
also
I've already
a
provided
OGGO thing.
I'll take a
preamble.
speaking list. I have Ms. Gaudreau and then Ms. Khalid.
No, not Khalid.
Quickly caucus amongst ourselves for like 2 minutes before.
J'aimerais vraiment qu'on prenne.
I would appreciate it if we can have 2 minutes to read this motion, and
Okay, so they're going to suspend.
I'm the first person
Perfect,
on
so
the
I need to
list,
grab a
and I
coffee.
think that I have a sub-amendment.
Quick 2 or 3 minute suspension was sent out this morning, but I understand people require a few more minutes. So why don't we do that? 2 or 3 minutes, we're suspended.
Okay, so just if anybody didn't catch what Kelly's trying to do there is usually the House, through consultation with every party, will decide on the PBO. Instead, what Kelly's saying is we want that, but we also want it to be brought forward in OGGO.
Or would we like to keep him around in the chance that we can get Mr. Berdisi in for 5 minutes?
I mean, if we're able to dispose of this motion in an efficient manner, then perhaps our witnesses can stay. If
Why don't we
we're
invite them to
anticipating a
stay to
lengthy
have some OGGO coffee and OGGO cookies at the back, and maybe we can resolve this quickly. We're back suspended.
Okay, so sorry, I was talking, but Kelly was just saying there, can I let go of the witnesses because the Libs still have one round? But he's like, oh no, we'll just wait, I guess. Hopefully the motion debate doesn't take too long, and if we can get that round in before the end of the committee, then they're going to try and do that. But I would have just let the witness go, to be honest. But it's up to the committee to decide. So we'll tune into the House for a couple minutes, and then we'll come back to this. Let's see what the House is doing.
Families are struggling, suffering. Now, there are agencies and experts like the Parliamentary Budget Officer, the credit rating agency Fitch. They're telling us that we're in a real bind. Can she tell us what she's been hearing from her constituents in her community? The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-Lévis.
I've never seen
I'm
Goodwin speak
happy
French.
the member is asking me that question. Food banks have never been so busy. The demand is very high. They're receiving 2.2 million visits a month. I hope my numbers are right. They're in my memory here. And these are not unemployed Canadians visiting food banks. They're employed Canadians who wake up in the morning, who go to work and still have to line up at food banks. I'll add one more thing, Mr. Speaker. A food bank in my riding said the following: the demand continues to rise. 6 new families visited us this week, and 20 new families in total have visited us since mid-September. And This week, we didn't have any meat delivered from Moisson Beauce or Beauce Harvest. So what are people supposed to eat in Les Échemins? What are people supposed to eat? Questions and comments, the Honourable Member for Rimouski-Lama-Tapédia. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's funny to hear the Conservatives say, we disagree with the budget because the deficit is too high. Quebec's motto is, we remember. In 2009, Harper ran a historic deficit as well. And if you put that deficit from 2009 into your calculator and you adjust it for inflation, it's basically $78 billion. It's basically the same amount as today's deficit. Then for 6 years in a row, including 2009, they ran deficits. And now the Conservatives are saying, oh, we don't support this deficit. It's massive. Then they say this type of massive deficit, it's just not in our makeup. It's not in our DNA. The Conservatives have floor crossers now. Does that not mean that this budget is conservative in nature? I will give the Honourable Member for Bellechasse-Lévis the opportunity to reply in 30 seconds. Mr. Speaker, it's all a matter of context. My colleague, when he states a piece of information, he should give us the context. He's a young man, my colleague, but in 2008, there was a global financial crisis, Mr. Speaker. Resuming debate.
For Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the budget today. And I wanted to, just before I start, I wanted to give a shout out to my brother, Larry. He made me this pen. He's made me a few other pens. He lives in Chilliwack. And anyway, I just wanted to just recognize my brother for just being a good brother over the years. But anyway, let's get to the budget. So remember when Mark Carney said that he would spend less and invest more? He actually meant that in reference to Justin Trudeau. But his budget does the exact opposite. As the recent report from the Parliamentary Budget Officer discovers, it spends billions more and invests billions less than the Prime Minister promised he would do just months ago. So this is from February 19th, and I think we all remember when he was running to be leader of the Liberal Party, in essence running to be the Prime Minister, he said out of his own mouth, the essence is to spend less and invest more. That's right from the Prime Minister's mouth. Well, here it is. It's kind of confirmed by the Globe and Mail, one of the Prime Minister's and Liberals' favorite newspapers. Goes on to quote, so the former governor of the Bank of Canada and Bank of England criticized the government of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for spending too much. And we all know that, don't we? Total federal spending has jumped by about 9% on average since Liberals took office in 2015, and the federal workforce has grown by 40%. This is right out of the Prime Minister's mouth. He said, it is clear that the federal government is spending too much, right? At the same time, Canada as a whole is investing too little. And so that was the promise he made to many Canadians across the country. And a lot of voters took him at his word. And it seems like just a few months after that promise had been made, how quickly things have changed. So how does Mark Carney spend more and invest less?
I have to remind the member I cannot use the name of the Prime Minister in the House. Refer to him by his title. I'll let the member continue.
My apologies, Mr. Speaker. How does the Prime Minister spend more and invest less? Even Justin Trudeau in his last budget projected his deficit for that year would be $39.8 billion. Trudeau ended up spending $61.8 billion just before leaving. He led us to believe...
Okay, OGGO should be back.
So important that the choice of a parliamentary budget officer be neutral and unbiased, impartial. So it's not somebody who's just appointed. And with the greatest respect due Mr. Jacques, even though he had 18 years of experience, there is an appropriate, legitimate process that we should adopt as parliamentarians. So Ms. Bloch's proposal is really legitimate. If the PBO is chosen as in relation to other potential candidates, But, Mr. Chair, I would like to file a sub-amendment to ensure that we can have a complete process, and I will read it to you in French, but you probably already have it in your email. I would like to amend that pursuant to Standing Order 108C, the Standing Government on Government Operations and Estimates mandate its subcommittee to consider nominations for the position of Parliamentary Budget Officer, that the usual rules of procedure used by the committee apply to the sub-amendment, including the routine rules adopted. So recommend that the Council submit to the committee a short list of candidates within 2 weeks as part of the consultation process specified in the Parliament of Canada Act, that the sub-amendment go ahead in camera and proceed to have interviews with the pre-selected candidates in the context of the Parliament of Canada Act, consultation process in the Parliament Act, and that unless otherwise decided by unanimous consent of the House of Commons, an appointment to the position of Parliamentary Budget Officer shall be made only if the nominee has been selected by the unanimous agreement of the Standing Subcommittee of the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, which includes members from each recognized party in the House, and that the House be so informed by way of a report from this committee, period. Well, it's explicit. It's important that the use of the House's usual rules, that's why we talk about Article 108, or Standing Order 1081, and then later that's why, well, Chair, seriously, the essence of the motion is more than relevant. What has been added, it's after some verification we did to ensure conformity, legitimacy, and I'm waiting for your questions and comments.
Ms. Khalid on the amendment? And then
Sorry, Chair, I wasn't sure. I didn't want to interrupt Ms. Goudreau, but I did want to ask if you had ruled on the admissibility, whether the main motion is in order or not.
I believe it is.
Can we ask the analysts? And because from my understanding,
it's not the analyst;
okay.
It's the chair that
Okay,
rules, and I
so-
believe it is admissible, both from a matter of hand motion or issue and.
If I may, so when a motion directly contradicts the Parliamentary Act,
I'm going to interrupt your. I don't believe it contradicts the Parliamentary Act. You're welcome to challenge the chair, but I believe it is.
Okay, in that case, then I do challenge your ruling, Chair.
Okay, we'll go to a vote on. This is on the original amendment. Or sorry, this is the original motion. The original motion. Sorry. Yeah, we're a bit.
S'il vous plaît,
It is a bit late to be.
So, please, I need to have a good interpretation. I didn't get it. My mic is open, so I couldn't hear. I would like you to repeat the 4 last sentences about what we're going to vote.
It's turning itself off after we suspend. So I'm not sure, and it only happens intermittently, it seems. We're actually discussing your amendment right now. Ms. Khalid was asking about whether the original motion was in order, although we are late on ruling on that. I'm happy to address it. I believe it is in order both from a hand motion being put forward, but I believe the motion is in order itself. Ms. Khalid is challenging that ruling that the motion is in order. So we're now going to vote on challenging my decision that it is in order.
So we're voting to sustain the chair.
On the original motion, yes.
If we want to sustain, we vote yes. Correct. Sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, just I don't want any mess ups.
If we like his ruling, we vote yes.
We'll now go to the clerk who will do a vote. Then we will return to the proper way. We'll get to the sub-amendment, or to the amendment, I apologize.
Mr. Gasparro?
No.
Ms. Khalid?
No.
Madame Rochefort?
No.
Mr. Bardisi?
No.
Ms. Bloch?
Absolutely.
Ms. Jensen?
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence?
Yes.
Et Madame Gaudreau?
Oui.
And Bloch,
so,
yes.
Yeas pour 4, 4, and nays contre 4, 4.
I'll vote in favor of myself.
Okay.
I will now go to...
Yeah, when it's equal for that question, your ruling is automatically sustained.
I know, I'm just teasing. We're now at the amendment that Ms. Gaudreau has
Get screwed, Khalid.
brought forward. We'll now start a speaking list on that amendment. Are you putting your name forward for the speaking? We'll have Ms. Khalid, and then if anyone else wishes to speak on the amendment, then Ms. Rochefort. Ms. Khalid, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair.
On the amendment.
On the amendment, just wondering if the text of that has been circulated to my email.
It has.
Thank you. In that case, then, while I read it, I'll pass it on back to you.
Ms. Rochefort, please. And sorry, let me interrupt quickly. I've mentioned this before. I mentioned the past Parliament. I've mentioned it earlier today. I have a speaking list. I will advise who's speaking and who's next. I'm not going to treat you like children and remind you that you have to put your hands up to speak. If you don't put yourself on, that is your responsibility. Then we will consider the debate finished. But I will note who's speaking and who is speaking next each time. I'll give you that much. Ms. Rochefort.
Chairman, I would love to see the complete
That's been emailed.
Okay, so I haven't yet been able to see it, but nonetheless, I'd like to come back to the fact that there is a process that's part of the Parliament of Canada Act, and I would simply like to read it. It does say that the Governor in Council shall, by commission under the Great Seal, appoint a parliamentary budget officer after consultation with the following persons and after approval of the appointment by resolution of the Senate and the House of Commons. A, the leader of the government in the Senate or government representative in the Senate, the leader of the opposition in the Senate, and the leader or facilitator of every other recognized party or parliamentary group in the Senate. And B, the leader of every recognized party in the House of Commons. So there is participation by all of the parties in the nomination process. And then it talks about the experience and the expertise. The parliamentary budget officer shall have demonstrated experience and expertise in federal and provincial budgeting, and I think that's what Madame Gaudreau was referring to. It does mention that the parliamentary budget officer holds office during good behavior for a term of 7 years, but may be removed for cause by the Governor in Council on address of the Senate and the House of Commons. But it also speaks about reappointment, and the parliamentary budget officer may be reappointed for one or more terms of up to 7 years each. However, the parliamentary budget officer shall serve no more than 14 years in office in total. Then it specifies that in the event of the absence or incapacity of the parliamentary budget officer, or if that office is vacant, the Governor in Council may appoint any person to hold that office in the interim for a term not exceeding 6 months. And that person shall, while holding office, be paid the remuneration and expenses that may be fixed by the Governor in Council. The parliamentary budget officer shall be paid the remuneration and expenses fixed by the Governing Council. And so, Mr. President, I was just wondering, how do we reconcile the fact that we do have a Parliament of Government Canada Act on this appointment, for this appointment? How can we be moving a motion, an amended motion in addition to that, that is not in keeping with the current budget, approved
it is.
Parliament of Canada?
It's just adding the fact that we want OGGO to decide as well.
Act, I guess. Pardon me. Sorry.
I don't get what's wrong with that.
So would you be able to respond, to explain to me why?
I'm not part of the debate. If this is the debate on the amendment, I've ruled it has been upheld by the committee. We're debating the amendment, and I would ask that you get to the amendment, or we'll move on to Mr. Bardisi.
So this is just proof of the fact that there is there was.
Okay. That's fine, but you're not debating me, Ms. Rochford.
Sorry,
you're not asking. Excuse me,
Point
Ms.
of
Hilly,
clarification,
let
Chair.
me finish
Please go ahead.
my conversation. We are debating the amendment to the original motion. You're welcome to continue debating the amendment and getting back to the topic of the amendment, but this is the debate at hand right now. If you're done your intervention, we can go to Mr. Bardisi, but this is not a Q&A session between the two of us. Ms. Khalid challenged my ruling. It was upheld by the committee, so now we're back to the amendment.
So I'm simply asking, how can I be debating an amended motion that is not in keeping with the current acts of the government?
If you're done debating the amendment, we will go on to Mr. Bardisi. Do you have a point of order?
Oh, you can just add me to the list,
Okay.
Chair.
I think we're going on to Mr. Bardisi now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm going to be very clear on the amendment. We're not going to go to reading from Parliament of Canada Act anymore. We want to stick to the amendment at hand. I saw a lot of hands about to come up and yell relevance previously, and I saw they were patient with it. But let's get to the amendment, please. Thanks, sir.
Merci bien. J'apprécie l'amendement.
Thank you. And I appreciate the amendment from Madame Gaudreau, my colleague. And I think I have the meaning of the amendment, the essence of the amendment in front of my eyes. But if I make an error and I start discussing the motion itself, I apologize. To my mind, the amendment is interesting. It gets very involved in terms of the processes of the offices of the cabinet that I haven't seen as a MP yet. I've been here for 6 months. That there's very specific advice concerning the process referred to in the primary motion.
Back to your last intervention. So I'm going to excuse our witnesses. Thank you, as always, for being with us today. We sincerely appreciate it. Hopefully we'll see you back for the supplementary Bs, if we can get that in before we rise for Christmas. Thanks very much again for your time. Mr. Bardisi, I apologize. We'll go back to you, sir. I'm glad you got to see all this live. And
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors,
thank you, Chair. So, on the topic of the amendment, as I said, there are very specific instructions given to the Cabinet and to the Privy Council office by this committee, and that concerns me, the fact that it's more specific than necessary, possibly. And in a broader sense, that my colleague, Ms. Rochefort, did read the relevant article in the Parliament of Canada Act, and I have seen that there's no role for the Senate in this amendment. We have a bicameral system in the country, and the role of the played by the Senate is very important, and it's in the Act, and it's an amendment that does not make reference about maybe correcting a primary motion, which might have a role for the Senate. So I know I'm newly arrived to this committee, but I know that there are other committees that are concerned about this position, and I don't know if the other committees have their own advice in terms of getting involved in the it's maybe implied
this
in
translator
the
is frustrating.
Spirit of the motion to have advice that comes from MPs and committees. But as I've said, there are other committees concerned about this position. We had Mr. Jacques and some of his colleagues at my committee where I sit, which is the industry committee. So I wanted to note this. And thirdly, I have noted this addition in the sub-amendment in Madame Gaudreau, who wishes us to proceed in camera. And I know that there are processes that are very intentional in the choice of representative of officers of Parliament. And I would like to know if her advice in this amendment aligns itself with processes for other officers of Parliament. So I appreciate the amendment of my colleague, Ms. Gaudreau, but I just wanted to add these 3 points, to present these 3 points to the committee for debate.
Gasparo.
Oui, bon, je vais pouvoir...
Good. So I was waiting to have some questions. It's fascinating. So my main concern, Chair, is that we're not here to modify internal processes. We're here to avoid the possibility of having no transparency and no bias. So this proposal is an enhancement. If you read it as I do, and unless there's a contrary decision made by unanimous consent at the House of Commons, it means that the process ultimately is that will mean that we have recommendations and they will do what they want with them. But you and I will have gone through a legitimate process for hiring. You've all done this in your lives, to say, here is the person who would be able to offer the services that we need, and we recommend it to the House of Commons. And that's where
she's very handsy.
Things happen. And instead of having like an interim officer and whose term ends in March, I think that if we all have unanimity, it will show that we don't want to have a privilege or we don't want it hidden. It's an opportunity to say that we're just enhancing, improving a process. We don't want to go against the rules of procedure. They can say, well, we don't accept your recommendation, your recommended candidate, and we don't change the 7 years, et cetera, et cetera. So it can only be positive. And I also understood that if we do a job with impartiality, our PBO isn't with us, it's important to know that we weren't just chosen on the fly, but we were chosen as a result of a legitimate hiring process. So I think that's why it's important.
Sparrow and then Ms. Khalid.
Just going back to the some of the comments that were made, and they are thoughtful, which we always expect from you, of course. There is already consultation built into the act. Do you mind if I just see that for a second? No, I'm not. Don't worry, I'm not going to reread it because clearly you didn't read it the first time. So why read it again? So
sorry. Let me interrupt here. It's Mr. Gasparo has the floor, so we don't want comments from one side, but the comments the others came back were not appreciated. Let's just stick to our points.
There are already consultations built into the Parliament of Canada Act, and it talks about it. It's very clear. And I won't read it again, but it does mention the Leader of the Opposition. It does mention the Senate. So that is already built into this act, which supersedes us. So that's sort of point one. And I've talked about this before at this committee, and that is, what precedent does this set for not only our government, but future governments? And are we going to open up a Pandora's box where maybe future governments have to deal with all sorts of other committees, then saying, okay, well, we need to have our 2 cents on some appointment, or maybe even this very appointment itself. And if we're trying to streamline how government works, I think we can all agree that we are trying to move more quickly around this place. I've only been here 6 months, like my colleague and my colleagues. Seeing how the process of how things work here and how slow it is, I'm sure some of you pulled out your hair when you first got here as well. So we're all trying to move more quickly. This actually does the opposite. So I would just encourage maybe a slight change in this, and that we look towards what the impact and the precedent we are setting here by considering this motion.
Great. We'll go to Ms. Khalid and then Ms. Block, but I'm going to ask everyone to please stick to the amendment. Trying not to interrupt, but we'll stick to the amendment. A lot of this is the original motion we seem to be discussing, but if we can stick to the amendment, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I begin my remarks, how long do we have this room for today?
Till 2 p.m.
Wonderful. I have a flight to catch. I'd like to be home with my family, but anywho's, I'm more than happy to talk about this really important amendment.
You live in Mississauga.
And Chair, I do want to clarify. I know that you've said that
what the heck?
The amendment and the main motion are two separate things, but I think that ultimately is talking about the same, as in it's trying to create a procedure, and as Marielle and Madame Goudreau has argued, that this procedure is to increase transparency, perhaps, in the House. I want to echo, first off, a couple of the comments that have been made by my colleagues, and I know that I had tried to seek clarification from yourself and the table, but alas, it was considered to be part of the debate. I do want to know, and I will be looking into this on my own time, Mr. Chair, how does Section 79 of the Act work with this motion? And when we're talking about specifically creating a procedure as to how the selection of a public officer is made, not only do we want to analyze to see what the long-term implications of this would be, how it would impact other standing committees. I'll give an example. I know that the appointment of a Supreme Court justice has a component of Parliament where parliamentarians on the Justice Committee, both in Parliament and in Senate, have the ability to question the nominee by the Governing Council. So, and that's a whole process that's been established. So I'm not sure when we talk about creating this process of a subcommittee, and then the subcommittee, as the amendments outlines, that basically there needs to be unanimous consent for a name to be put forward. Now, what happens then? This is again like I'm speculating and contemplating the implications of this amendment and of the motion. What happens if the government says thank you so very much, but nope, we're not moving forward with what your recommendation is? What happens at that point? And this is not something that's contemplated in this motion at all. And I'm not sure if we have the powers to be able to make those kind of amendments. I mean, I 100% agree with the role of this committee to provide oversight, to provide transparency, and to make sure that a PBO is responsible for Parliament and not for government, as Mr. Jacques made very clear today. So I do want to analyze a little bit of that intersection between what the Parliament Act currently says about the appointment of a PBO, and then what we are suggesting through this amendment and through the main motion here in this committee, I guess in terms of is it going to be a complementary piece, or is it a replacement piece? How does the law interact with that? I'm not sure if any of our folks want to help answer some of these legal questions, but I do believe that this motion and the amendment is a little bit rushed because we're not fully contemplating the outcomes of this motion at all. So,
oh my God,
and I really appreciate that Ms. Goudreau has gone on to say that the subcommittee of this committee would be the body that would conduct interviews with the candidates, and then would meet in camera and review the applications and then shortlisted candidates, provided within 2 weeks by the Prime Minister's office as part of the consultation process. So I think there's a lot that is going on in here. Who proposes these names? Is it open for applications, or is it members are now going to come forward and say, okay, these are the people that we want to interview? Or is there an application process, or is there a recommendation process where, say, opposition leaders propose names or our party whips propose names? I think there's a lot of vagueness and unnecessary specificity as well, in that it doesn't quite correlate with what the Act and the intention of the Act is in Section 79. So I think I would propose that instead of kind of jumping into this and making a decision today, I would like to take some time to really analyze what the full implications are, not just in parliamentary procedure, but also in the outcomes of and the precedents that we would be setting for other committees and other processes as well that are contemplated in the Act, and other pieces of legislation and regulations within our Parliament. So it's a long shot, but I will try it. It is my birthday, but.
Yeah, point of order, please.
Are we
Relevance
talking
to the
about
sub.
the amendment, or?
Yes, we're talking about. Oh, sorry. Please go ahead, Chair.
I'll rule on the point of order. You haven't been referencing the agenda or the amendment at all. I think we should dispose of the amendment first before we get to the motion. The original motion, I would ask that you do stick specifically to the amendment, which I know we always give broad, allow a lot of space to discuss things, but you haven't addressed the issues of the amendment as such. So I'd ask you to bring back to it.
Sure.
But
Absolutely.
I'll allow you to continue your thought. We cut you off at it is your birthday, so go ahead.
You know what? Maybe I'll finish the other thought before I come to that one. So that's exactly the point I was trying to make, Mr. Chair, is that the amendment and the main motion are both trying to.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. We are debating the amendment.
So sure. Let me then go word by word on what the amendment is proposing to change in the main motion.
We already know what it is. We don't need you to read it.
Mr. Clerk, he sent the stuff that is highlighted in blue is what is contemplated to be amended, right? Okay. So the amendment contemplates and proposes that the subcommittee of the Standing Committee on OGGO, the mighty OGGO, creates and meets in camera to review the applications if necessary, and it sets a timeline on the Prime Minister's office. So what the point that I'm trying to make is, if I'm only talking about these amendments here, but also I can't talk about these amendments without contemplating exactly what it is these amendments are trying to do to the main motion. And ultimately, they're trying to create a process by which a PBO officer is selected.
It's just, we're trying to work with the amendment. And then we can go back and you can use those points when we're back to the main motion, correct?
But just, allow it to just continue, but please, let's stick to
Chair, that's exactly the point that I'm trying
to finish.
We
always allow wide breath, but please, let's get to the amendment. Not necessarily how the amendment and the motion go together, but the amendment. Go ahead, please.
Chair, I don't think that these amendments fully contemplate or fully achieve what Ms. Goodrow is trying to achieve here in creating more specific, rules that are being proposed here today. So I don't think that this is quite accurate. It's not; these amendments are not achieving the results that are being contemplated by this committee and by these amendments. I would again say that I would like to have a little bit more time to analyze these amendments and how they play with the main motion, and how all of that interacts with the Parliament Act. So now I will go back to the other point that I was about to make. Mr. Chair, I know that I'm always a glutton for punishment. I love this committee, but it is my birthday, and I hope that if I move a motion to adjourn, that we could today and come back to this with a little bit more information. So at this point, Mr. Chair, I do move to adjourn this meeting.
We'll do a quick vote. Before we do, I will note we've had the heat turned up. It's taking a bit of time to warm up the room. A lot of us have been. We'll go over to the clerk for the vote.
Sparrow? Yes. Ms. Khalid? Yes. Madame Rochefort?
Oui.
Mr. Bardesi?
Yes.
Ms. Bloch?
No.
Ms. Jensen?
No.
Monsieur Gourde?
No.
Et Madame Gaudreau?
No.
And you're staying.
No. Okay.
I have Ms. Bloch, Mr. Goudreau, then Ms. Rochefort. Go ahead, please, Madame Bloch.
Thank you very much, Chair. And speaking to the amendment that has been put forward by Ms. Goudreau, speaking to the sub-amendment put forward by Ms. Goudreau, as the mover of this motion, I see it as a friendly amendment. I understand the reasons that she is wanting to have the subcommittee undertake the consultation process, which we do understand is part of a process that is outlined in the Parliament of Canada Act, and we're simply asking to be a part of that process, recognizing that perhaps it would be a bit more streamlined and important to do that work in camera with a smaller group of people who represent all parties on this committee. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ms. Gaudreau, then Ms. Rochefort. Oh, sorry. Mr. Gourde, then Ms. Gaudreau. Okay. Sorry, then Ms. Rochefort. Oh, man, ooh.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Ça me fait plaisir de me joindre.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to join OGGO today. And I find that the sub-amendment requires a lot of attention because it would allow all parties to participate in the choice of the coming PBO. And we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in now because the interim PBO does a really good job, and he would deserve to have the job. I don't understand why the government did not appoint them. He knows everything that happens, but I think it was indicated that his days are counted, which is really unfortunate because we'll lose a lot of experience. That being said, well, now there are some people talking. Maybe we'll just wait. That being said, to be able to allow this committee to have a limited list. We won't name the person, but Ms. Gaudreau could tell me if a list of 6 possible candidates, we didn't specify the number, if the subcommittee could look at the capacities of these people, the experience, their competencies, and maybe see them. That's done for appointments elsewhere. It's not a precedent. To the contrary of what I believe I heard here, it exists in other places where parliamentarians participate to create a short list, maybe to go from 6 to 3 candidates, and the best of cases might even be the best to just send one eventual candidate. But it might be probably give more flexibility to go from 6 to 3 to eliminate lesser caliber candidates. But the symbolism of allowing all parties to participate in the choice of a parliamentary budget officer in an impartial way. And the PBO has to be impartial. And when it's the government who appoints the PBO, we're not always sure because the appointments are not always impartial, unfortunately. In some places, it's not so much of a problem. But as a PBO, that's unconditional. That person must be impartial, must be competent. That person pronounces statements on the future of our country. With everything that happens in budgets, we need to have an opinion which comes outside of our bubbles because we're all partisans here. But when the PBO raises an alarm over something, we have to pay attention. We can't take it lightly. And if we have a partisan appointment, we have a risk that during the entirety of the mandate of a PBO, that they wouldn't raise issues, potential problems with the budget, and Canadians wouldn't have access to transparency. And I think that here it's important to be sure. If you're telling me that we're going to appoint the interim PBO who does a good job, that would be good. He really proved beyond doubt that he deserves the position. And he was already in the system, so there are a lot of people in that office. He was number 2 in that office, and he did all the work necessary to deserve getting the position that was not given to him. Do you know why he wasn't appointed? We don't know. But if you chose to choose, well, we would choose to be able to participate in the appointment of the other. And I would say that the interim PBO should be a candidate on the future list because he deserves the job. So I hope you've understood my message clearly. We're doing well. If we want to do it, we have to do it well. We really have to find an impartial parliamentary budget officer, one who's truly impartial. It's not for me, it's for my children and my grandchildren. I have 7, almost 8, and I'd like them to be in a situation where they understand what's going. So it doesn't take a lot of years to escape budgets. Now there are rating firms that internationally that are starting to ask themselves questions about Canada. If we close our eyes and we just say everything's going fine, everything's good. That's not how things work in the financial sector. There are no Canadians that would be able to have a personal budget that's like the country's budget. You'll say it's not the same thing, but someone always has to pay, and it's a taxpayer who'll have to pay and have to pay a lot. And these, my children who will be birthed in April, they have this debt, $35,000. So if the baby starts crying, well, they'll have a good reason to cry. So I don't know if you on the other side are interested in that, but this really concerns me. Ensure that we have a good process and a good PBO who's impartial. Thank you.
To Ms. Goudreau, and then that's the end of our speaking list. And of course, I jinxed us as soon as I said the heat was on. I think they turned the AC back on. Well, we have advised them. Madame Goudreau.
Oui, OK. Parce qu'à mon...
Yes, because my mic was on and I wasn't getting interpretation. But that's okay. So just adding something before we call the question. Maybe some people were not here at the time. None other than Mr. Jason Jacques said himself that he hoped that there be an impartial process.
Okay.
So he wants to be have the possibility to do it, and if he's appointed, then it would be impartially.
It's very, very similar to the system that the Liberals, NDP, and PCs do in Ontario. We'll call the vote then if I have no one else on the speaker's list on the amendment.
Oops. This is going to pass. Hey, all the libs left. Oh, she went to go get a coffee.
OK, alors j'ai un remplaçant pour M. Gasparot, mais c'est M. Zuberi, je ne le vois pas.
I have someone to replace Mr. Galfaro. It's Mr. Duberry, and I don't see him. And I think it's a vote for. No. The microphones are died. So he said present. I'm present. Mr. Zuberi.
The libs left.
Are you voting for or against? Against.
Madame Rochefort.
They're just going to drop the ball there. They were going to lose anyway, but...
Madame Lapointe, vous avez pas de carte d'écoute, donc contre, OK. Monsieur Duberry, Madame Lapointe, si vous pouvez trouver votre carte d'écoute, ça serait bien apprécié, s'il vous plaît. OK, Ms.
We appreciate it if you find your headset, Mr. Zuberi and Ms. Lapointe.
Monsieur Gourde.
Oui.
Madame Gaudreau.
Oui.
OK, yes pour 4, et nays contre 4, 4.
Everyone in favor of the amendment? Okay. So the amendment carries. We're back to the original motion. I'll start speaking list. Mrs. Block.
Yeah.
She's got her headset.
Thank you, Chair. I guess there are a couple of things that I want to point out about the motion. And perhaps some of the things I'm going to point out would be a response to some of the concerns that were raised. If you read the motion, we are recommending that the Prime Minister's office and Privy Council office submit to the committee a short list of candidates. So that would be where the list comes from the Prime Minister's office and Privy Council. It is part, we are calling to be part of a consultation process that is already specified in the Parliament of Canada. So those are two things that I think need to be brought forward. We simply want to be a part of that consultation process. And as the chair pointed out, this is a process to gain consensus from all parties and is keeping with best practices, given that the province of Ontario has adopted it. And I would simply say this, that what we have asked is for the deliberations and the choice that may come out of any deliberations, and it has to be a unanimous choice, would then be reported by way of a report to the House. Thanks.
Great.
A point of order?
Sure.
What's the point
I
of
simply
order?
want to indicate that we had not completed our questioning of our guest today when we moved this particular motion, and there was an agenda that wasn't respected, and we moved forward with a motion. And so I would simply raise that with the chair and the vice chair for further discussion, because I think
that's
was
not a point of order, but thanks very much. I have no one else to speak on this, so we'll call the vote.
She doesn't know how to do a point of order. I mean, she
Monsieur
doesn't
Zuberi?
know how committees work.
OK, contre. Madame Khalid?
No.
Madame Rochefort?
No.
Madame Lapointe?
No.
Ms. Bloch?
Absolutely.
Ms. Jensen?
Yes.
Monsieur Gourde?
Oui.
Madame Gaudreau?
Oui.
Yes pour 4-4 and nays contre 4-4.
Yes.
Yes.
With that. As such, it passes. With that, unless there's anything else, we'll wish Ms. Khalid a happy birthday and hope she gets to the airport and to her family in time to celebrate. We are adjourned.
Okay. That was kind of funny. I'm not going to lie. Has she ever had a valid point of order? I think once. I think she's like the new Khalid. Like, she just really... what is a juris law degree? Is it a real lawyer? Yeah, that's the degree you take in law school. It's a 3-year program, and that allows you to go write the bar after. The bar is what actually gives you your license, your credential to practice law. The degree just allows you to understand what's on the bar and gives you the ability to go write the bar. Wait, is passing a good thing? I couldn't keep it up today. Yeah, so basically all of that, the motion was a very simple motion, is that when the PBO is, because this is an interim PBO, he only has a 6-month mandate. I think he's already halfway through that. The appointment of a new one or the continuation of his mandate needs to be mandated by all the parties in the House of Commons and in the Senate. What all the motion was asking is that as well, can we get consultation with OGGO, so that way there's, I guess, a little bit more consultation. It's a very simple motion. Personally, I believe if it's already okay with the Parliament and the Senate, then it's going to be the same thing in OGGO. It's just going to reflect the same. So it's just an extra layer, but I think it's kind of redundant in my opinion. But did Khalid pass the bar? I don't know. From what I can see, I don't think she actually holds a bar certificate from any province, and she studied law in America, and I don't think she has a bar in any state. She doesn't have a bar license in any state, and I don't see her ever working for a law firm. So I don't think she actually ever practiced law, and I don't think she ever passed the bar, but she does have a degree in law. I subscribed to your channel for quite some time. Today I noticed it was not subscribed anymore. I've been hearing that a bit, is that YouTube kind of unsubscribes people. Yeah, I'm not sure why that's happening. But anyway, we've got 29 minutes until question period. And then afterwards, we're covering the Ethics Committee, which is going to be really, really, really good. That's at like 3:30, so like 15 minutes after question period. We've got the PMO and the Ethics Committee. We've got Conservative MPs Barrett and Cooper, who have been really like bulldogs in that committee, pushing for increased transparency by public office holders, and they're investigating the Conflict of Interest Act. So we're going to hear from the Prime Minister's office on what they think, how much of a threshold is Carney pushing the line here, and should more screenings be put in place for his meetings, and whether or not his investments are contradicting some of the policy-making decisions that he's doing. So, like I said, we've got just a little over 20 minutes, and then we'll tune into question period, so we'll call it there. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in and watching. As always, thank you, Raven, for the 10 gifted. I really appreciate that, and Brad Martin, thanks you guys for joining into the coffee support. And Raven, thanks, like I said, thanks for the gifted. Yeah, that's it. We'll see each other shortly here. We've got about 20 minutes, so see you guys soon. Thanks for watching and tuning, and see you shortly.